I thought I was just visiting a friend, until her older sister looked at me, smiled, and said words I'll never forget. "You'll thank me one day." I wasn't expecting her that evening. My plans were simple. Stop by to see a friend, share a laugh, maybe argue over what to order for dinner. She was the kind of friend who made me feel like I still belonged in that in-between place of early adulthood, not quite grown, not quite a kid anymore. I was comfortable around her, and maybe that was why what happened next hit me so hard. When the door opened wider, her sister appeared. I'd heard her mentioned before, casually, but nothing prepared me for the presence she carried. She was older, yes, but it wasn't age I noticed first. It was the composure, the way she entered the room as if she had nothing to prove and nothing to chase. She didn't need to announce herself. She didn't need to compete for attention. She had it the moment she smiled. Her smile wasn't loud, not the wide, carefree grin her younger sister had. It was quieter, deliberate, the kind of smile that seemed to say she already understood more than she was letting on. My eyes caught on the details. The slight curl of her lips, the fine lines near her eyes that deepened when she laughed, the calm steadiness in her gaze. She was beautiful, but in a way that made beauty feel like a secondary trait. It was the grace, the way she stood, the warmth beneath her teasing tone that struck me hardest. She extended her hand to me. "So this is the friend I've been hearing about?" she said. Her voice carried a softness, but underneath it there was a note of amusement, almost as though she were testing me. I took her hand. The touch was brief, professional even, but there was something about the way her fingers rested for a heartbeat longer than necessary. A subtle warmth lingered on my skin after she let go, as if she'd left behind more than just politeness. The evening carried on, casual, ordinary. My friend chatted easily, bouncing from one story to another, but my attention was split now. Every time her sister spoke, I noticed the careful rhythm of her words, the pauses where she listened more than she talked. She wasn't trying to dominate the space. She simply existed within it with a kind of calm authority. I caught myself stealing glances when I thought no one noticed. The way she brushed her hair back when it slipped forward, the way her hand lightly touched her necklace when she laughed, as though grounding herself. Small details, ordinary gestures, but to me they felt heightened, amplified by the sudden awareness that I was paying too much attention. She noticed, I think. There was a moment, quick, unspoken, when her eyes met mine across the room. She didn't look away in embarrassment. She held my gaze, just for a breath, and then smiled that quiet, knowing smile again. I wasn't sure what it meant yet. All I knew was that the evening felt different now. And though I couldn't have explained why, something told me her presence was going to linger long after I left that house. The evening unfolded the way evenings usually do when friends gather. Laughter spilling over takeout containers, conversations bouncing in 10 directions at once, and that comfortable hum of voices that makes the world outside feel far away. But for me, there was a current running beneath it all, her older sister's presence. At first, she blended in effortlessly, content to let her younger sister do most of the talking. But little by little, she drew me in. It started with something small. A comment she made when I was quiet for too long. "You think too much," she said with a smile, tilting her head toward me. "That's dangerous at your age." Her words caught me off guard. It wasn't an accusation, but it wasn't entirely light either. I laughed, a little awkwardly. "Is that so?" She leaned back in her chair, studying me with a calmness that made it feel like she could see past the surface. "You're serious, thoughtful, but sometimes people your age forget to just live. You'll miss things if you keep your head up in the clouds." I should have brushed it off, but instead, I found myself answering honestly. "Maybe I don't always know how to just let go. I'm afraid of wasting time." Her smile shifted, less playful now, softer, almost approving. "That's not such a bad problem to have," she said quietly, as though she knew exactly what I meant. From then on, it felt like the noise around us faded. My friend was still talking animatedly, but I was only half listening. Every time her sister spoke, I found myself leaning in, catching the subtle notes in her voice, the thoughtful pauses she left between sentences. She wasn't just filling silence. She was giving words weight. Our conversation slid naturally into more personal territory. She asked about my work, about what I wanted in life, and I surprised myself by being open. There was something about her presence, steady, calm, without judgment, that made honesty come easy. When I admitted, half under my breath, that sometimes I felt invisible among people my age, she didn't laugh it off. Instead, she rested her hand lightly on my arm, just for a moment. Invisible? She repeated. No, you're just not meant to blend in. The touch was fleeting, but it stayed with me long after her hand pulled back. My skin tingled where her fingers had rested, as though she'd left behind something unspoken. She laughed later, a low, warm sound that contrasted with her younger sister's brighter bursts. It wasn't louder or bigger, but it was richer, lingering in the air, wrapping around me like a private melody. I didn't say anything, but I knew I'd remember that sound. When she excused herself to get more tea, I realized something unsettling. I was waiting for her to come back. Not because I needed her to, but because some part of me already wanted her company more than I should have. It happened by accident, or maybe not entirely. One of those ordinary shifts in the evening where conversations scatter and people drift in different directions. My friend slipped out of the room to take a call, leaving me in the quiet of the living room. A lamp cast a warm pool of light across the coffee table, the distant hum of her voice muffled by the closed door. For a moment, I thought I was alone. Then her sister appeared. She moved with the same calm grace I'd noticed earlier, carrying 2 glasses of water. She set one in front of me without asking, as if she already knew I'd accept. You looked like you could use this, she said softly. I smiled, a little sheepish. You read minds now? Her lips curved into that familiar, knowing smile. Not minds, just people. There's a difference. For a few seconds, silence settled between us. Not awkward, but charged. The kind of silence that makes you acutely aware of every small sound. The faint ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, even the sound of my own breath. She sat down across from me, not too far, but closer than I expected. The light caught her features in a way that softened them, made them look almost vulnerable despite her composed exterior. I noticed the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind you earn from years of laughter and maybe a few sleepless nights. They didn't make her look older. They made her look real. You watch people too much, she said after a moment, tilting her head. Maybe, I admitted, but only when someone's worth watching. Her gaze lingered on me then, steady and unflinching. I felt my heartbeat quicken, and for the first time that night, I didn't look away. There was something in her eyes. A softness, yes, but also a sharpness, as if she was measuring me, deciding whether I was as sincere as I seemed. The tension in that gaze was subtle but undeniable. I couldn't tell if it was amusement, curiosity, or something deeper. All I knew was that I couldn't move, couldn't break the spell. When she finally did, it was to slide the glass of water toward me. Her fingers brushed against mine, lightly, almost deliberately. The contact lasted no more than a second, but it sent a current up my arm, startling in its simplicity. She seemed to notice the way I stilled, the way my breath caught. Her smile returned, small, private, like she was aware of the effect she had on me but chose not to say anything. Just then, the sound of footsteps approached from the hallway. Her younger sister's voice broke the stillness as she re-entered the room, oblivious to what had just passed between us. The older sister leaned back in her chair, her expression unchanged, as though nothing had happened at all. But for me, everything had. I took a sip of the water she'd given me, and even that simple act carried a weight it shouldn't have. It was just a glass of water, just a shared silence, just a brush of fingers. And yet, it felt like the start of something neither of us was ready to name. The night stretched longer than I expected. By the time most of the noise had faded, the house carried that hushed stillness that comes only when the day has truly ended. My friend had excused herself early, worn out from laughter and wine. I lingered in the living room, debating whether I should call it a night, when I noticed her sister still awake, seated by the kitchen table with a cup of tea. Something about the scene drew me in. The quiet glow of the overhead light, the way she sat with her shoulders slightly slumped, a posture I hadn't seen from her before. She looked unguarded. I hesitated at first, but she caught sight of me standing at the doorway. "Still awake?" she asked, her voice low, carrying the weight of fatigue but softened by something more personal. I nodded and stepped in, pulling out the chair across from hers. "Couldn't sleep. Guess my mind's too restless." She gave a faint smile, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. "Restless minds are good company. At least we're not alone in it." That simple confession, that she, too, was awake with her thoughts, opened the door to something deeper. For the first time, she seemed willing to lower the calm facade she'd worn earlier. I watched her fingers trace the rim of the mug, the way her eyes softened as she admitted, almost reluctantly, "Sometimes I worry I'm too protective of her, of my sister. I've spent years watching over her like a second mother, really. And now she's grown, carving her own life, and I don't always know how to step back." I'd never heard her speak like that before. It wasn't the confident, teasing woman who met me with sharp glances and knowing smiles. This was someone revealing the cracks beneath the surface. I leaned forward slightly. "Maybe that's not a weakness. Maybe it just means you care more than most people do." She let out a quiet laugh, one that carried a hint of self-doubt. "Or maybe it means I don't know who I am without someone to take care of." Her words struck me. For the first time, I saw not just an older sister, not just the composed woman who seemed untouchable, but someone who longed to be understood. And in that moment, I felt an ache I couldn't fully explain. The ache of wanting to ease her burden, even if only by listening. I found myself speaking honestly, too. "I feel out of place sometimes. Like people my age don't take me seriously. Like I'm supposed to be carefree when I don't really know how to be." Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a long moment we simply sat there, the quiet of the house wrapping around us. Then, gently, almost instinctively, I reached across the table and brushed away a loose strand of hair that had fallen against her cheek. The gesture was small, innocent even. But when she didn't flinch, when her gaze softened instead of pulling away, I felt something stir between us. Fragile, unspoken, but undeniably real. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. And in that silence, I realized we had both revealed more of ourselves than either of us had planned to. The next morning unfolded in easy brightness, sunlight spilling across the kitchen counters, the smell of coffee filling the air. My friend was in one of her cheerful moods, teasing me for oversleeping, nudging my arm as she passed by. On the surface, everything was as light-hearted as it should have been. But beneath it, I felt the weight of the night before, the memory of her sister's tired smile, the confession she'd shared, the way she had let me brush back that loose strand of hair. Those moments clung to me, even in the simple noise of morning. At one point, as my friend leaned against the counter scrolling her phone, she looked up at me and smirked. "Don't let my sister intimidate you. She has that effect on people. But deep down, she's harmless." I laughed it off, but something about her words made my chest tighten. If only she knew. Harmless wasn't the word I would have chosen. Her sister was many things. Thoughtful, guarded, magnetic, but never harmless. She was the very opposite of that. She was disarming. Later, when my friend disappeared upstairs to take another call, I found myself once again alone with the older sister. She was standing by the window, arms crossed loosely, looking out at the garden. The morning light caught her profile, highlighting the graceful lines of her face. She turned when she heard me, her smile carrying that same quiet amusement as before. "So," she said softly, "she told you not to let me intimidate you?" I froze, startled she'd somehow overheard. But her expression told me she didn't need to hear the words to know. I shrugged lightly, trying to play along. "She thinks you're scary." Her smile deepened, but there was something more behind it. "I'm not scary. I just see more than people want me to." I didn't reply right away. There was too much truth in that sentence, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to admit how much she already saw in me. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice so it was only for me. "You'll thank me one day." The words struck deeper than I expected. They weren't said with malice, nor even with the weight of a warning exactly, but with something in between. Teasing, yes, but protective too. It was as though she was reminding me that whatever I thought I wanted, there were consequences she'd already considered. Her breath brushed faintly against my cheek as she said it, the closeness sudden, intimate in a way no one else would notice if they walked in. For a heartbeat, I thought she might reach for me. Instead, she simply rested her hand on the edge of the window frame, steady and deliberate, as though keeping herself anchored. I managed a quiet laugh, though my pulse was unsteady. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous," she replied, tilting her head. "Just true." When my friend's footsteps sounded on the stairs, she pulled back with perfect composure, as if the moment had never happened. But I carried her words with me long after. A warning, a promise, and a mystery all tangled into one. It was late again when the chance arrived, the kind of night that feels stretched thin, like time itself is lingering just to see what you'll do with it. My friend had gone ahead with plans of her own, leaving me unexpectedly in her sister's company. She suggested a walk, nothing grand, just around the neighborhood to clear the air. I agreed too quickly, perhaps, though I told myself it was only for the fresh night breeze. The streets were quiet, the world dim under soft pools of streetlight. The air held a gentle chill that made each exhale visible, a reminder of how close the season was to changing. We walked side by side, her pace steady and unhurried, our steps falling into rhythm without effort. At first, we talked about little things. Her garden, the books she never had time to finish, my half-formed plans for the future. But slowly, the spaces between words grew longer, the silences heavier, charged with something neither of us dared name. We stopped at a small park bench, half hidden under a tree. She sat, her hands folded loosely in her lap, her posture calm yet contemplative. I sat beside her, close enough to sense the faint warmth of her presence in the cool night air. For a long moment we said nothing. I stared up at the faint scatter of stars above us, but my thoughts weren't in the sky. They were beside me, on the quiet figure who seemed both near enough to touch and impossibly distant. I spoke first, my voice low. "Do you ever feel pulled toward something you know you probably shouldn't?" She turned to me, her expression unreadable at first. Then slowly she nodded. "Yes," she admitted softly. "More often than I'd like to." The honesty in her words startled me, and before I could stop myself, I went further. I keep telling myself I shouldn't feel what I feel, that it's wrong or foolish or too complicated. But then I look at... I stopped, the sentence dangling, unwilling to name her outright. Her eyes held mine, steady, unwavering. She didn't need me to finish. She already knew. For a heartbeat, the world seemed suspended. Then she placed her hand gently over mine, her touch firm enough to anchor me, tender enough to undo me. "You don't need to explain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The warmth of her palm seeped into my skin, spreading through me like fire and calm all at once. Our shoulders brushed, neither of us moving away, and I felt the ache of something so close, yet still restrained. We stayed like that for a while, hand in hand, speaking no words but saying everything. It was not a confession, not fully, but it was more than silence. It was the closest either of us had come to admitting the truth, that something had grown between us, delicate yet undeniable. When we finally rose to walk back, nothing more was said. Yet the air between us had changed forever. The following evening felt different, though nothing outward had changed. The same rooms, the same laughter from my friend, the same quiet routines. Yet beneath it all, there was a hum between her sister and me, an invisible thread tugging at both of us. Every glance carried weight, every pause seemed longer than it should have. When it came time for me to leave, my friend was distracted, saying her goodbyes quickly before retreating upstairs. That left me standing in the doorway with her older sister, the cool night air seeping in through the open frame. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We simply stood there, facing the inevitable parting. She was the one who broke the silence, her voice low and steady. You've been unexpected. I almost laughed at the understatement. So have you. Her lips curved, but it wasn't the playful smile she'd worn before. This one was softer, tinged with something like sadness. She stepped closer, not closing the distance entirely, but enough that I could see the light catch in her eyes. This isn't the right time, she said, and though her words were firm, her tone was anything but cold. There are too many pieces that don't fit yet. Too much we'd risk. I nodded, though the ache in my chest protested. I know, and I did know. There were realities neither of us could deny. Family ties, the difference in our lives, the unspoken rules that guarded the line we'd been walking. But knowing didn't make it easier to stand there, so close and yet not allowed to cross the final distance. Then she reached out, slowly, almost hesitantly, and cupped my cheek in her palm. Her hand was warm, her thumb brushing once against my skin in a gesture that was both tender and devastating. You'll thank me one day, she murmured, repeating the words she had spoken before. But now they carried a weight that pressed into my chest. They weren't teasing anymore. They were a promise or maybe a shield, her way of holding back what we both wanted, while still acknowledging it was there. I closed my eyes briefly, leaning into her touch, memorizing the moment. And what if I don't want to wait for one day? I whispered, my voice rougher than I intended. Her breath caught, just enough for me to hear it. Then, with a trace of a smile, she withdrew her hand. Then you'll have to be patient with me. The finality in her movement told me the conversation was over, at least for now. She opened the door wider, the cool night brushing past us, and I stepped out. As I walked down the path, I glanced back once. She was still there, framed in the doorway, her arms folded now, but her eyes fixed on me with a softness that spoke louder than words. And in that moment I understood this wasn't the end. It wasn't a beginning either. It was something in between, fragile and undefined, but real enough to change me. And as she closed the door, I finally understood what she meant when she smiled and said, "You'll thank me one day." If this story touched you, don't forget to like and share it with someone who believes in unexpected connections. And if you'd like to hear more slow burn romances like this, make sure to subscribe and join me for the next story.